After nearly half a decade of delays, Canada's firearm confiscation scheme looks like it's finally about to get underway in Cape Breton. Let's have a look. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be taking a look at a new development in Canada's ever-evolving gun buyback saga. It has been a rather busy news week for the government's confiscation plans, because on Sunday, an audio recording was leaked where the public safety minister condemned the supposedly voluntary confiscation program for nearly 20 minutes straight, and then 2 days later, he got out on TV in front of the nation and told everyone why it was his job to go ahead and do it anyway.
Don't ask me to explain the logic to you on this, okay?
So here's a quick rundown of everything you need to know regarding the current state of the confiscation program, as well as some of the more egregious lies that they stated in their rather short press conference.
This program is voluntary. Nobody's having their weapon confiscated.
First off, why do we keep calling it a confiscation program? Well, it's because that's exactly what it is. Despite the sudden insistence of various Liberal announcements, there is nothing voluntary about this firearm confiscation program. If you do not hand in or destroy your newly prohibited firearms, you will be committing a pretty serious criminal code offense, violating either sections 91 or 92 of the criminal code, and you can be imprisoned for up to 5 to 10 years for violating those statutes. Now, despite the ongoing lies of the Liberals, this was confirmed in a rare bout of honesty from Natalie Provost.
All of the people in possession of one of the weapons that has been banned since 2020 and will not participate in the compensation program will have an illegal gun in its possession, and that's a criminal act.
So remember everyone, participation is voluntary, but you'll definitely be going to prison if you don't volunteer. The rest of the announcement was only about 12 minutes long, and it contained most of the normal drivel that we've come to expect by now out of the Liberals. AR-15s are scary, we gotta get them off our streets, we need to protect Canadians from the violence that lawful gun owners are not committing, and we can't be serious about combating gun violence without being serious about gun control. But they started off with a pretty shocking admission, like right out of the gate. It's been a common claim by the Liberals that this is not about targeting hunters or sport shooters, and Gary even said as much in Parliament just a couple of months ago. But then, he started the announcement with this.
I want to start by drawing your attention to the AR-15, specifically AR-15A2 Sporter Competition N-Bar. This weapon is derived from a weapon of war. It fires .223 Remington or 5.56 millimeter NATO caliber ammunition. It has the power to penetrate body armor.
I mean, of all of the rifles they could have chosen to focus on, they deliberately called out the one called the Competition Sporter. Like, I don't know how you expect people to believe that this isn't about sport shooters when you're banning firearms literally named after and designed for sport shooting competitions. He then goes on to say that it's derived from a military design and that it's capable of penetrating body armor. Ooh, scary. Now, of course, what he doesn't tell you, and maybe this is because he himself doesn't know enough about his job to actually know this, but there is no such thing as a rifle which can penetrate body armor. I mean, there's certainly such a thing as armor-piercing ammunition, but that can be fired out of any firearm that is compatible with the ammunition, which in this case is .223 or 5.56. Like, any bolt-action .223 hunting rifle is also an armor-piercing rifle by that measure. This rifle behind me, this hunting rifle, that's an armor-piercing rifle by the same measure. For example, here are 3 such cartridges. This one is a boat-tail hollow point round, which is purpose-built for match shooting. This one is a copper monolithic round, which is purpose-built for hunting deer. And this one is a green tip LAP round, light armor piercing round. All of these can be fired out of any compatible rifle, and those compatible rifles are far more than just AR-15s. However, most modern plates nowadays are designed to stop all 3 anyway. And this is also something which is not unique to .223 or 5.56. This could very easily be said about most other hunting rifles and most other cartridges, including sporting and targeting rifles. So it may well be that Gary just doesn't know this information, but ignorance is no excuse in a position as important as his, so this is about as dishonest dishonesty gets. Gary finished this up by standing on the graves of the Nova Scotia shooting victims, even though the audio leak just 2 days prior confirmed that he knew that the individual who committed this heinous act was using a firearm unlawfully acquired from the United States.
This all came after the mass shooting in Nova Scotia, who was an illegal firearms person, correct?
Had mental health issues.
But he had illegal firearms.
And next he got into the pilot program launching in Cape Breton, which will be the testing period while they work out the various bugs in their system for the impending launch of Phase 2 of the confiscation program. And to help sell the project, they got the local police chief/politician to come up and say public safety a bunch of times to ensure that Canadians know that this is about public safety.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
But it's overwhelmingly true, and this has been stated countless times by other police forces across the country. It is overwhelmingly true that we should not be expecting this program to have any meaningful impact on public safety because there is essentially no overlap between the lawfully owned firearms that the government is confiscating and those firearms that police are having to deal with on the streets. Like, our firearms are just, they're not on the streets. They're in our safes. The chief of police also confirmed that the program is voluntary, but simultaneously that we're also no longer allowed to legally possess these firearms. So, I really don't know how these people can tell these blatant lies with such a straight face. Make it make sense.
This program is really a way to help lawful gun owners stay in compliance with the law. We see this as giving them an opportunity to surrender what they are no longer allowed to possess.
After that, Gary decided he would try speaking French for what appears to be the first time in his life, and it was so bad, I could almost understand him.
Natalie Provost et mes collègues Natalie Provost et mes collègues au caucus et au cabinet.
After all of that, they got into questions from the press gallery, and much to my surprise, they actually kind of ripped Gary apart. They went at him pretty hard for what he admitted to in the leaked audio recording just a couple of days earlier. Basically, every single question was about what he said in the recording, and not about the launch of the program itself.
Happy to take your questions.
You don't seem to have confidence in this program. Why not? And is it appropriate to stay on as Public Safety Minister?
Why did you say moving forward was about Quebec?
You said on the recording that you did not think that local police had the resources to enforce this. Why don't you think that? And what's the point of moving forward with it if you don't think it can be enforced?
How is this? You say that the program is voluntary, but after the amnesty ends, the people are not in compliance with the law. So how is this truly voluntary?
The rule of law. Why did you offer to pay someone the difference in compensation and bail them out of jail? You're a minister. Why'd you say that?
It is human.
Why say one thing in private and one thing different in public?
Now, this is kind of surprised because the media has a pretty proven track record of going soft on the Liberals, but honestly, they kind of gave him the business on this one. The more mainstream media, though, has been a little bit more hit and miss on how hard they've been going at him since then. Just a couple of days ago, the CBC had Gary on for an interview on the controversy surrounding the various contradictions in the recording, and they asked him all of the right questions, but they really didn't press him on any of his answers. It was more of like a softball questionnaire to give Gary an opportunity to explain himself, rather than any kind of critical investigation for answers.
This has become a political issue for the Conservative Party. I regret that, and I don't think they should make this a political issue.
Yet despite that, the public safety minister downplayed this and basically all of his other condemnations on the program as merely an attempt at bad humor between two friends in a private conversation.
I said these two issues frankly, in bad humor.
It was said in jest. It was said in the context of two individuals having a conversation about a very sensitive issue that I know was important to the individual I was speaking to.
In his mind, this was merely a jest, a joke. He didn't really mean any of it, and he fully intends to, quote, do his job, despite everything he said about how pointless the program is.
But I'm resolved to do my job. This is what I've been tasked by the Prime Minister.
And hopefully I don't have to remind you how scary that is, because there is a pretty well-established track record around the world in the last century of what happens to countries whose peoples justify tyranny as merely doing my job. Spoiler alert, it never ends well for the citizens. The press conference ended with Natalie Provost stepping up and attempting to commit the government into banning the SKS, which is something that they have previously committed to not doing. And she said most of this in French, but there is a translation on screen by ex-user rhetoric. However, now that we have confirmation that this entire program is about satisfying the Quebec electorate, we really can't ignore the fact that the leader of the Quebecistani gun control delegation is still actively calling for its prohibition.
I get it. Quebec is in a different place than other parts of Canada, right? And this is something that very much a big deal for many of the Quebec electorate that voted for us.
Of course, despite the win that the government thinks that this is, many police forces in provinces across Canada are actively committing to not participating in this program, which only further solidifies the admission that this is a politically motivated program, not a public safety program. Nova Scotia has committed to not helping despite the pilot program which is rolling out there. OPP has committed to not helping. TPS, Toronto Police Service, may be non-complying, but that's actually not confirmed yet. And then you have the noteworthy holdouts of Alberta and Saskatchewan, who have directly enacted legislation to make participation basically impossible. However, it's worth mentioning again and again, but these provincial firearm acts do not protect you from criminal liability. When the amnesty expires, you will still be in violation of the criminal code, even if you live in those provinces. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Winnipeg has previously already committed to the program, and recently it looks like Surrey Police said that they're on board, and apparently that applies to most of BC from the looks of it. So at best, this will be a piecemeal program if it ever officially rolls out. Currently, the announcement for the nationwide rollout is expected in the fall, whatever that means, after the pilot program in Cape Breton, with national collection efforts beginning early next year. In the press conference, Gary said that the amnesty would be extended to October of 2026, but as of yet there has been no order in council actually confirming that, and there's nothing listed on the Gazette. So at the moment, that's merely a promise. We'll see if and when that actually happens and what the official date ends up being. As of right now, as of the time of recording, the amnesty still expires on October 30th, 2025.
And the order in council, as you know, is being extended from this October to October of 2026. So there is a one-year window.
As far as compensation goes for anyone participating in the definitely not voluntary confiscation program, that's a gong show too. They've confirmed that there is a $742 million spending limit on the program, and people will be paid out on a first-come, first-served basis. Rod Giltaka in episode 195 of the CCFR radio podcast confirmed that the government fully intends to leave people hanging with compensation on this program. In the technical briefing, they apparently confirmed exactly how many firearms they intend to compensate for.
We're going to pay for a total of 152,000 rifles, or shotguns, or whatever, firearms. We know that there are 126,000 and change restricted firearms. So those are going to pop up on your portal, self-populate. And so those are all the ARs and all the other guns that are restricted by barrel length or by name or by overall length. And I'm like, okay, you're paying for 152. You're telling me you know about restricted and registered 126. And then some of the budget's already been used up for the retail buyback. So like what, 20,000 firearms you expect on top of that? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what?
So 152,000 minus the 126,000 registered ones that they know about leaves them with 26,000 or so non-restricted firearms that they intend to provide compensation for. After that, the money is gone. They have absolutely no plans to compensate anyone beyond that point. But of course, you can only find out if you're getting compensation after you register with the program and tell the government what you have. At which point, they have you by the short and curlies, even though they have absolutely no intention to provide compensation for you. And for those who don't understand why this is a problem, there are way more than 26,000 newly prohibited firearms which were previously non-restricted. Like way more. They were more common than their restricted counterparts by a factor of several. Like we should comfortably expect somewhere in the area of around 300 to 500,000 of these on the low end, not 26,000. Now worse than that, most of the firearm compensation values are also well below what we paid for them. Honestly, some aren't too bad, and some compensation amounts are pretty close to their sticker price, whereas some others are down only, 10 or 20%. But there are tons of models which are being listed at well below even half or 40% of their sticker price or worse. Like one such model is the FX9. It's a 9mm pistol caliber carbine, which was moderately popular in the PCC sports shooting scene. One could easily run you $1,500 or more after taxes, even for just the non-restricted version. Yet if you hand it in, you're only going to get $675 for it. So not only are they wildly underestimating how many of these firearms they're actually going to have to compensate people for, but they're also wildly underpricing a lot of them. Now, the only logical explanation for this is that they're budgeting for, and they're even expecting, a fairly significant amount of non-compliance. Because there's just nowhere near enough money here to do it properly. But this is also the only way the government could avoid the political embarrassment of being required to spend several $billion on this program. And this is despite the fact that they continue to ensure us that most Canadians want this program. And of course, by now it's fairly obvious what they mean. What they mean by most Canadians is most of the Canadians that vote for us, we don't really care about the other ones. And this was confirmed beyond any doubt in the leaked audio by Gary Anadasangaree. This audio confirms that the Liberals are deliberately and unjustifiably criminalizing hundreds of thousands of innocent Canadians for political advantage. They're literally persecuting their political opponent's voter base in favor of their own voter base. This isn't just a crime against persons, this is a crime against democracy itself. This is not how free and democratic societies are supposed to work. Now, one thing a lot of people have been asking lately is, well, if this is just for Quebec, why can't we just let Quebec do things their own way? Well, the problem is then Bill C-68, which is now more commonly known as the Firearms Act. Normally, property regulation is under provincial jurisdiction. However, that all changed with the passing of Bill C-68 in 1995, when the federal government annexed this part of provincial jurisdiction by making all firearm regulation a matter of criminal law. So now not only is the misuse of firearms criminally regulated, but it also regulates the legitimate uses as well. All property aspects such as licensing, registration, classification, and ownership was solidified then under federal authority. And this was upheld by the Supreme Court in the Reference Re Firearms Act ruling back in 2000. On one hand, it is pretty convenient to have a national standard for this, but on the other hand, it now means that it's much more difficult for Quebec to have a carve-out to manage firearms in the specific way that they want to. And as such, they now impose their will on the rest of Canada through the Liberal government, who needs Quebec in order for their party to stay afloat. And this is also something that Danielle Smith in particular has been rather critical of lately. Like, she has long been touting that her province is planning to take the federal government to court over these gun bans as an invalid use of their criminal law power under Section 9127 of the Constitution. And she claims that this should instead be a provincial property regulatory matter under Section 9213, as it used to be historically. I think there is some merit in this legal action, but with the rollout of the confiscation program now underway, at least as a pilot program, it's now or never for Danielle Smith. But there is another angle that the leaked audio might be useful for, and this is for the CCFR's appeal to the Supreme Court. This is exactly the kind of critical evidence which could sink the government's claims that their gun bans are focused as a public safety measure, which is the backbone of their justification for these unlawful gun bans in the first place. However, the difficulty there is kind of twofold. First off, you typically can't submit new evidence as part of an appeal to either an appeals court or to the Supreme Court, which kind of makes sense. You can't exactly appeal to an upper court that you believe a lower court made a faulty decision in some fashion on the basis that you now have new information that the lower court didn't have a chance to consider. However, there are some rare exceptions to that general rule. Namely, the evidence must not have been available previously, the new evidence must be directly and centrally related to a core issue in the case, the evidence must be believable, which is important, and there must be a reasonable chance that it could have affected the outcome of the case. Now, the leaked audio here, it appears to check all of those boxes. However, there are also certain other time limits and other restrictions on filing documents with the court beyond a certain window after the application is made, so I'm not entirely sure on the specifics of all of it, but this could be an option and this avenue could have some promise. Then the other part of that problem is whether or not they can even make it to the Supreme Court in the first place. The CCFR and friends have filed their applications, but the Supreme Court generally only hears around 6 to 8% of those applications in a typical year. So that's, right out the gate, that's not great odds. However, we do also have some things going for us on that front. And one of the biggest hurdles to getting to the Supreme Court is whether or not the case bears national importance. Like as a yardstick, we can consider the fact that the Supreme Court very recently declared a stay against the extermination of an ostrich farm out in BC. It ordered this stay while it considers whether or not it's actually going to hear the case. Compare that against a very questionable policy like our gun ban, which has the effect of criminalizing no fewer than several 100,000 Canadians. And that says nothing about the plethora of constitutional rights and property issues that are also involved in this case. Like if the Supreme Court is willing to dabble in ostriches, surely the questions involved in our case are at least as important as those. So yeah, a couple of interesting angles to be had there. Now, there are a lot of people out there calling for Gary Anadasangaree to be fired for this debacle that he is creating, and I certainly get the reasoning. But I, for one, don't want to see him fired, because he's given our community the first real bits of ammunition and leverage that we've had in years, even if it's by accident. Like, if we keep him around, it could very well happen again. On top of that, we should not want him to be replaced by someone more educated and competent and ruthless on the matter, such as Natalie Provost, who would certainly just go scorched earth on our community. Like, that's not a better outcome. After all, there is a rather famous quote from Napoleon Bonaparte: "Never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake." And I say, we let them continue the mistake that is Gary Anadasangaree. All that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.